Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to a Capture One quick live session. It's been a while. I've been away, so I've missed you all. So it's nice to be back. Hopefully I can remember how to use Capture One. So today we're going to be looking at, let's get it up on screen, this shot from a good friend of the house, Emily Teague.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back.
Sorry, I've just got my monitor going in the background, so let's turn that off so we're not hearing me twice. So there you go, told you I'd forget how to stream. Anyway, so we've got this shot from a good friend of the house, Emily Teague, one of her projects over in India. So this is just a little play I had with it earlier today. So that's as it is edited. So we're going to just spend 15-20 minutes and run through from start to finish. So let's get back to the original shot as it was, and let's hide our browser in Capture One so we've got a bit more real estate. I'm just going to move me and make me a little bit smaller just so we're not taking up too much space as well. Okay, so all right, so first of all, as I said, shot taken by Emily. Now we've got a couple of moving things coming into the shot which are going to be a bit distracting. So the obvious thing to do first of all is just take a crop. So let's just crop out this guy on the left. I'm also going to crop out some of the roof here to some extent as well, because I think that could be a bit distracting. So I'll end up with something like this. So let's go for that. Let's also turn off proofing mode so we've got as much space for you guys to look at as well. So I'm going to start with that. Just generally before doing any editing, I like to crop. Just I find it difficult to start editing when the crop isn't where I am. Personal choice. Some people like to leave cropping at the end, but for me at the start. Now out of camera this is actually pretty good, so it doesn't need a huge amount of editing. We could kind of leave it there and say, well, I'm done. But personally, the way I'm looking at this shot is that it's a little bit dark over on the left-hand side compared to the right. So he's falling into shadow probably by those two things that we're going to kind of move across. So this guy is a little bit darker compared to the right-hand side, which is much brighter. So naturally you tend to start looking over here as opposed to our subject. So it would be nice if we could lift him up a little bit, but keep the right hand side at the same level before. So a simple way to do that is to grab a gradient mask. So I'm going to grab our gradient mask tool over here on the left and draw this over. Now if I hold down shift, that will keep those bars nice and straight. So they'll be locked perfectly to vertical. Now if I press M on my keyboard, you can see where the mask is. So it's going to be predominantly on him and then fade across over onto the left. Now I don't want it to stretch that far over to the right. So if I hold my Alt key down on the keyboard, then I can just change this to a slightly swifter fall off like so. So now we've got the choice of just brightening up that side of the photo. By the way, if you have any questions, do fire them into the comments on Facebook or YouTube. I can see them coming in, and then when we get to a suitable point, I'll pause and answer a couple of those as well. Okay, so we've got our layer over here on the left hand side, and now I'm just going to bring up exposure just to lift him up a little bit as well. Now the gradient mask is dynamic, so if you thought actually I don't quite like where it was placed, there's no reason why we can't adjust it in real time as well. So I'm going to settle with something like that. If we turn our layer off, then you can see before and after. So now everything is a bit more even, as opposed to now looking over on the right hand side, I'm kind of more focused on him a little bit as well. Let's name that. So I'm just going to call that grad, so we know what was happening. Okay, a few basic adjustments. Let's just go back to our background. Now the reason why I left these basic adjustments till after this step, because now I feel I'm at the point where everything is normalized and kind of leveled off nicely. So I'm going to bring the highlights down a bit to make sure that it's not too bright on the bags of stuff, whatever we've got going on here. So I'm going to bring the highlights down and the whites down a little bit as well, and just bring the shadows is probably all right actually. If I open up the shadows, it's going to go a bit flat. If I open up the blacks, it's also going to go a bit flat. If anything, I might richen the blacks a little bit like so. Contrast wise, it doesn't really need much more, it's about right, but I just bring in a tiny bit of clarity as well. Okay, now it's quite a busy shot, there's lots of stuff going on. Kind of want to focus on him on the left a little bit more and our sleepy guy on the right. So I'm going to add another layer and we're going to bring in a radial mask like so. Now for our radial mask, we need our radial mask cursor. We're going to grab that, and where you start drawing, that's going to be the center of the mask, and it's going to expand outwards. So I want the center to be around here. So if I just pull down to the right, then we get our radial mask shape. Now we can adjust this like we could with our gradient mask. So these three lines, if we press M, you can see how the mask is going to look. I don't want to darken his face too much, so I'm going to move it more over this side and then just feather it off slightly as well. So now if we press M, that's the kind of mask shape it's drawn. Now it is dynamic, so if I want to go back at any point and change it, let's just tweak it out a bit longer so he doesn't get too dark. So now I'm going to play around with some of our exposure tools to darken this down a bit. Now if we use exposure, these shadows are going to get quite dark. They're kind of about right, so I don't really want to make those any darker. But if I use brightness, that's just going to pull the midtones down a little bit more. And if I'm worried, if I want to counteract the shadows getting a bit too dark just on that radial, then there's nothing to stop us bringing up the blacks just a nudge as well. So if we turn our radial on and off, you can see the before and after change like so. And if I've overcooked it a bit, then we could also bring the opacity down. But that's now much more focused on these two guys in the center. So if we do a quick before and after, so if we turn on the before and after, actually let's do instead of a split screen, let's do the full view. So that's before, so quite dark over here, quite bright on the right hand side. If we click this, now we can see it's shifted more to the brightness over on the left hand side, so we're focusing on him a little bit more. Let's just have a quick break for questions. Let's see, I saw Rajesh says he's from India, loves the pic. I was asking if there's a stacking tool. Not necessarily. HDR merging, no. There is a plugin from now I've said that, I can't remember the company, but for HDR merging, Photomatics, they do a plugin for Capture One, which uses a whole bunch of really sophisticated tools to blend together. So there is a plugin where you can bounce out to Photomatics, which works pretty nicely. 805 was asking, is there a way to fine-tune a crop at a more narrow zoom level without a zoom out to grab the crop lines or handle? I'm not entirely sure what you mean, but if we have our crop in and we zoom in, let's just go over to the left, then you can still see your crop handles when you zoomed in. So I don't know if that helps your task at all. And don't forget, when you are cropping, if you right click, you can also get your aspect ratios up as a quick shortcut if you didn't know that. There are three guys. Can I not count today? There is 1, 2. Oh yeah, there's another guy there. That's right. He hadn't magically sprouted arms. But these two are the ones I was focusing on for sure. And last good relevant question from Aditya. How do we invert the radial mask? So if we're on a radial mask, you've got two choices. You can right click and we can say invert, like so. When you're drawing the radial mask, you can actually grab the outside line and snap it inside the middle, and that will invert it. Or if you right click here, then you can also set the radial mask to permanently draw inside if you like. So a couple of different ways to do it. Alrighty, okay, so where are we at? Well, I'm pretty almost happy with that. We've got two more things that I might like to do. One is just for a bit of color toning or styling, we could throw on a style. We had some relatively new styles come out from Beyond Film. Now in terms of color toning, the first one actually just warms it up a little bit, gives a bit more punch and a bit more contrast. The Beyond Film styles come in a few different contrast variations. So actually F400 looks quite nice as well. Now the cool thing is I don't necessarily want the full weight of the style, I just want a hint of it. So rather than applying the whole style over everything, if I right click, I can make a style layer. So if I say apply to new layer, like so, and we go over to our layers tool, we can see we've now got our style layer. So if we turn this on and off, you can see what the style is doing. It's a little bit heavy for me as it is, so I'm just going to bring this down slightly so the opacity just levels off a little bit. So now if we turn this style on, just gives me a little hint of color toning, but it wasn't too aggressive as it was before. And if I need to fiddle with any other aspects like the blacks, I might just bring up the blacks a tiny bit and then just make sure my highlights are fine as well. But that just gives me a hint of that style without the full noise. So it's really flexible to have those styles as a layer as well. So not only have you got the flexibility of a few different contrast variations, but adding it as a layer just gives you that extra dimension too. Now the last thing which I find a little bit distracting is this light bulb hanging down here. So we're going to grab our heel brush and let's just zoom in a little bit. And let's just take it out. So let's just start drawing and see what Capture One does. That's pretty good. If we needed to adjust it slightly, I'm just going to select it and use my cursor keys just to nudge it a little bit as well, just so that line lines up a bit better as well. So now we've got rid of our light. Oh, sorry, I thought I lost you guys then. Just looking at your questions, I thought I had a slight blip on my computer and I was worried that the stream had gone, but we're all good. Okay, question from Phil. Can you darken the white bales on the left-hand side a little bit more? The ones just behind him? Yeah, we could do. What I would do if I just go back to my background for a second. Oh, and I did lose Capture One there. Let's just open you back up and get back moving to that. So I did think my computer just went a little bit funny for a second there. So let's go back into it. That's not the picture we were using. So let's go back and open up my other catalog and then we can answer your question. So sorry about that. Okay, so here we go. So here we've got our dude back here. So the question was, could we darken those bales on the left hand side a bit more? Yes, we could. I mean, if we're looking at them, I see what you mean. They're just a little bit bright on the left hand side. So what we could do is just bring the whites down a little bit as well and then bring our highlights down. And that's just got that back a little bit as well. So yes, we could do. Let's see, Christina is loving Capture One already. That's good. So Phil, we answered your question. That was, can we darken those bales down? We could also brush in a slightly darker exposure tint as well if you wanted as well. Nigel was saying, could we use a luma range on the style to subdue just the highlights? You could, but generally 9 times out of 10 you don't really need to. Like if you felt these were still too bright to some extent, what I personally would do was bring the brightness down a bit. So I'd cut the brightness down a little bit more, and then if we were worried he was getting a bit dark, then we could open up the shadows a tiny bit and the blacks as well. But generally, that was Nigel asking, I think, that's kind of extreme to need to go to a luminosity mask to, you know, to really get back to all those really fine start again, David, to kind of make an adjustment to an extreme highlight like that. Yes, you could make a luminosity mask, but it's probably a little bit overkill. Generally, if you play carefully with the highlight slider and the white slider, then you can kind of get the most out of it. So on my F200, what I had here as well, I could also bring the highlights down because that style boosts the highlights a little bit. So I could actually bring the highlights down and the whites down on there as well, and that would be fine for me as well. Good question from Adia. What's the difference between styles and presets? Very simple. A preset is just one tool preset. So that could be like an exposure preset, or it could be a sharpening preset or something like that. A style is a combination of everything. So that could be a whole bunch of different adjustments packaged into one style, which is what the film styles or the Beyond Film styles are doing, for example. Okay, let's have a look. Is it impossible to add a black and white preset to a separate layer, or why is it impossible? No reason, not that we're being mean or nasty or anything like that. It's just how Capture One is built. Currently, it's not possible to do black and white on a layer. Let's just make that a little bit bigger so we can see our final layers. So it's just a limitation currently. Might change in the future, who knows? But as I said, no reason for us to block it intentionally. It just doesn't work in the way Capture One is engineered at the moment. Alrighty, so let's have a look at before and after. So there's our before. As I said, the reason of throwing that grad in was to kind of brighten him up, to move our point of view over to the left a little bit. We also had the radial mask and getting rid of our light bulb, and also a little bit of tinting with that film style as well. So that's just moved kind of everything, the focus, over to him. So I might actually bring that opacity down just a little bit more. So it's just got a hint of that color toning. Ken says, do I ever develop your images with proofing on? The only reason why to have proofing on is when you're going to a process recipe and you're proofing to, for example, like resizing it, so you can see what the output sharpen is gonna look like. If you're going to you want to look at the JPEG compression and all those kinds of things. But when you're just editing, there's no point just having the proofing on. Uses more resources, might slow your computer down a bit if it's not as a mid-range or powerful machine. So there's no point having proofing on until you go to the export stage. Okay, let's see, let's answer a last couple of questions. Martin says, this photo is super beautiful. It's a great shot, isn't it? It's just really nice. I did an Insta Live with Emily yesterday, just chatting about her street photography. If you want to see Emily in action and talking about her work, we've shared a video on our YouTube channel as well, chatting with Emily. We've done a couple of webinars with her. She did a recent chat with SmugMug, good colleagues and friends of ours over at SmugMug, and did a whole session chatting about her work as well. And that's also on her YouTube channel too. Great. All right, thanks for joining today for this little quick blast through Emily's fine shot. Sorry for the little hiccups from myself and the other technical aspects as well. Always the way, unfortunately, when you're a bit rusty after a few weeks. Now, don't forget, tomorrow, if you haven't yet signed up for it, and I hope you will, is that I've got a very special guest, Joe McNally, coming onto a webinar, and that's less about editing. We're going to talk about the process behind Joe's fantastic work. So how he plans for the shoots, how he executes, and so on. So lots of discussion about BTS and some of the shots which are bigger and grander. So we were looking at one this morning with him which used 14 lights, for example, or some of the huge aerial projects he's done with lighting as well. So talking about that whole process of planning, execution. The title is Impossible Photos, so it's those seemingly tricky shots that you can never get. So please sign up for that. That's going to be tomorrow, not the same time as this, going to be 1 hour later. So technically tomorrow it would be 35 minutes time from now. So do sign up for that. You'll find details for that on the events page of Facebook, or you can go to learn.captureone.com as well, and you'll find it at the very top of our learning hub where you can sign up to. So please come along and listen to Joe. Nice. Thank you for joining again, everybody, and I hope to see you tomorrow with Joe's webinar and also in the future as well. Take care and see you all soon. Bye now.